When I look at this photo now, I think how young and fresh we all look. It also awakens the longing I sometimes feel for the people, the energy, the passion, the all-night deliberations. In SNCC, I really did feel like I died and gone to heaven. My strongest image, though, of this demonstration is of Bobby Yancey, long the number 2 person at the Schomburg Library in New York, who was wearing a fur, and upon being carried away by the police, shouted, "Watch the fur! Watch the fur!" She later told me the fur was fake, but the image endures. In jail, the men and women yelled back and forth and sang freedom songs to each other throughout the evening. Eventually, our wonderful attorney, Howard Moore, who was married to Julian Bond's sister, Jane Bond, Howard Moore got us all out, and we went directly from jail to a church where the congregation welcomed us with freedom songs and the best fried chicken I'd ever eaten.
There is a theme, a thread of self-defense, which is sprinkled out throughout the book. We have some authors who talk about getting out of jail, and then at a mass meeting, their father was sitting under a street light with a shotgun on their lap. Some of the time, it's even like a throwaway line. It's like, well, of course we were like this. And it's only at my age, I won't even say that I'm older than Bobby, I have begun to reflect that perhaps some of the violence in the South would have been worse had not all of those people been sitting out there under the street light with rifles on their laps.
You know, sometimes we're part of the message system that kept us alive. Because one of the things that we learned about in Mississippi is that you listen to what people are saying. That grapevine moved faster than the phone. And sometimes that grapevine was the difference between whether you were going to live or whether you were going to die.
In 1964, I was fortunate enough to make my professional debut as a performing artist on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And with an audience of over 15 million people, Carson decided he wanted to know about those sit-ins. And he wanted to know how Angeline Butler got out of South Carolina and started singing. So he asked, "How did you start singing? How did you get involved in those sit-ins?" She answered, "Well, I left South Carolina to go to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And there I became involved in sit-ins, freedom rides, and voter registration campaigns. Well, actually, that was the first time I decided to go into show business professionally." Carson said, "Oh yeah? You mean an agent called you up and said, 'I've got a sit-in for you this afternoon'?"
Now, the book has 6 editors, 3 black, 3 white, all SNCC women. We met in Baltimore 4 or 5 times a year over these 15 years, all on our own dime, didn't take an advance. And it was not always easy, 6 strong SNCC women. But we knew we had to stay together. And the reason was that these women's stories were too important, particularly to the coming generations. We had to get these stories out into the world. Okay, why is the book important? Because, the so-called master narrative, the common assumption is that, women in SNCC and women in the movement, poor little tired women, just oppressed to the ground. Okay, no, we were strong women. Many were leaders in their own right before we come into SNCC. And in fact, Diane Nash is in our book. She was a leader of the Nashville movement. Ruby Dar Smith Robinson becomes executive secretary in SNCC and was the strong hold in that Atlanta office. Joyce and Dory Ladner, Joyce is in our book. They were mentored by the 3 greats of the Mississippi movement, Medgar Evers, Clyde Kennard, Vernon Damer. So the history also doesn't usually include the amazingly strong local women who were the bulwark of the movement.